as colorful a presentation. It's one slide only, but we'll try to make the talk interesting. My name's Roshan, born and raised in Delhi. I keep coming back to IIIT Delhi as my home. I think I was the first intern batch here when it started in 2010 with Professor Jalote, and I've been able to associate with the university in a few different ways over, I think, the last 10, 12 years. First as a student, then as a person who got a recommendation from here, then as an advisor in the government, working with the university in a few different ways. And it's really good to come back, and I try to come here and give a talk every time I'm trying to do something new. So this is the 5th talk that I'm doing, I think, over the last 15 years. So hopefully the next 5 years will be fun too. So while Ganesh and I met first at Science on Tap, which is something that we started in a pub in Hoskas, under 21 should not go, or should go but not drink. And we started chatting about the fact that while he was doing the very colorful, delicious work about looking at food, I was sort of working on the residues of what remains from our food. And that's a journey in itself, but I thought I'll focus about my talk around two sorts of things. One, on what I'm doing, and two, some interesting open problems that might be of interest to the audience here from the journey that I've had. I founded this company after about 12 years in government and academia. So I've been to Stanford and Princeton for my master's and PhD. I've worked with the Aam Aadmi Party, the Delhi government, and the Punjab government for a while. I've seen things from inside and outside. So I always say I constantly work with high quality, high integrity people in academia, and the less said, the better about politicians in general, but at least the best of the rest in politics. And that allows you to, I think, interact with a very interesting scope and scale of things. I think a lot of professors here, Pravesh Biyani himself, Tav Pritesh Sethi, PK, Raghava, Tanmay, many people in many different ways, and obviously with varying degrees of success, have engaged with the government in various ways. And having looked at both of those institutions, I thought it's time to learn how to make a company and how to run a successful nonprofit, at least for the next 10 years. And I thought, what's a mission problem that I really want to solve? And that'll keep me interested for 10 years. I also say, where are there very few people going into that ecosystem? So the obvious answer could have been renewable energy or water systems, where a lot of money is, but I try to, it's like maybe going to the UPSC exams or getting the PhD and becoming an academic in the US. There's enough good people doing that. Where do good people not go? So I think in North India, air pollution is one hard problem. So I think the next 10 years I'll dedicate on air pollution. And I think I'm starting with stubble burning because that's a problem between Delhi and Punjab. At least as of now, I feel there could be a way to do something more with a few governments there and a lot more civil society actors coming in. Over the last 4 months, I've been traveling across Punjab as I've started up since June. Spent the whole stubble burning season in the place where the stubble was being burnt. So the maps that you see, I was visiting at least about 500 of those fire dots and talking to people about why you do certain things. And then it struck me, maybe from almost prescient and sort of a callback to Carl Sagan in Cosmos, where he says, if you want to invent an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe, right? So making something from scratch, just like with your food, the very fact that a farmer probably has the most risky business person in the country in terms of the number of risks that they have to manage in the balance sheet that they have is probably the most fascinating thing that they do. And a part of what they do and that comes to your table is now seen as a problem for the rest of North India. There are a lot of interesting things that one can do to convert that waste into value. There's a lot of obviously policy, engineering, scientific, different sorts of solutions that can work together, but it's, I think, interesting to see the canvas of where this is. So in terms of what we are doing at Saroja.earth, the goal is to work on air pollution abatement. In 10 years, if we can get Delhi's AQI to 100, that would be a success of the company. What path it takes, how much money it makes, is a secondary problem altogether. And I've found some investors who are at least okay with that worldview. So if there are some I think now some good VCs out there as well who are willing to put money behind impactful problems and also not to make you run on steroids. So I think that's also a great development, which I was very happy to see. I don't think that existed about 10 years ago. There was a lot of sharks in that space. What we're doing here is trying to build an open source scientific platform and a data repository for sustainability across North India, and that's the superset. So we're just like Sam Asher and Paul Novosad built Dev Data Lab, which is, I think, used by a lot of academics, just like young school students built COVID-19india.org, which was a publicly managed and built system of data. I think a lot of people, you might have used that, but it was all built by students scraping data, visualizing data, verifying data from a host of different sources. And sort of combining those two ideas together, making it publicly utilizable, accessible, mineable, visualizable, programmable in some ways, and then also being able to create a network of researchers who can create knowledge. So what Stub the Stubble is I think, trying to do the 2 out of 3 things which I think knowledge is useful in society for. One of which you are doing, which is the creation of knowledge itself, by having high quality people come together, interact regularly, come up with ideas, and create some knowledge. But the 2 other things that Stub the Stubble will try to do is, from the insights that come from almost any discipline, whether it's air pollution, whether it's transportation, whether it is food systems, try to first diffuse that knowledge in the real world and then try to make that into some kind of reality. So that's what Stub the Stubble is. It's right now just a beautiful, good repository of fire data. And sometimes people talk about crop fires, but they just don't know what the crop fires are. How does that get measured? How do 5 satellites measure them in the air? How do those numbers differ in various ways? But the idea is to keep building stacks of open data sets on fire, air, earth, so just like Captain Planet, hopefully the heart will figure out itself. But think about fire, energy basically, think about soil health, think about agriculture, thinking about any of these systems, and find a way to create an open, publicly managed data set. I think that's the first goal. Because there seems to be very few people who have an incentive to do this well in the government and are not paid well enough in the private sector to do it. So I think there is potentially some scope where we can merge a lot of the different actors that I've sort of laid out in the state, in the market, in civil society, and in academia or media to come together to build something like that. Now, on top of that, there are, at least from a computational standpoint, there are some really interesting questions that a lot of you students can work on. A lot of faculty could also explore working on. One is, the creation of this multimodal data set will be reasonably unique in that very few people, I'm sure this is a common problem that researchers or even practitioners face, is that we don't know everything about one geography in a given area, right? Do we know air quality, the water quality, water quantity, where the infrastructure is, where the people are, where are they moving, about one geography in India, and model that really well? I don't think we have that. So we use a lot of proxies. So there's scope to build really interesting new air quality indices. And I think that's, and something called an air toxicity index, which really looks at many different kinds of air quality data sets and tries to come up with something new. The AQI that you guys still hear about in the media is a 50-year-old polynomial function. That's about it. It's PM 2.5 in a polynomial function, and that's given to you as a number. When actually toxicity in your air comes from many different sources, and it's actually very different than any other mega city in the world. So as an academic problem or an intellectual problem, there's, I think, a real scope to be able to build something like that. Second is, and these are, I think, some learnings from my journey, right? There were some missions that were working on crop diversification, and I saw a lot of millet farming happening, a lot of potato farming happening in various places. When you'd ask people, why don't you do this, even if you get a guaranteed amount of money? So there's obviously the business of diversifying away from crops, which is from rice to, let's say, a millet. There's the technical part of it, which the farmer does understand well. There is the market question, which is obviously a much more complex problem, which I will get into, but it's not the scope of this conversation. But one thing that they did say was, we don't have great recipes that are regularly available and widely dispersed that can become a part of our palate. right? So in terms of thinking about what a culture's palate is, what a geography's palate is, what their historical preference for food is. So you're looking at the science of the food itself, but I'm sure there has to be a lot to do with the science of the tongue as well. So I think one common sort of thing that came out from a lot of FPOs, and I have a lot of FPOs who are willing to try that in my network, is how do we get to one more level of processing and good food that is tasty. And this is probably an interaction between both science and, culinary science and computer science. But there's a very clear space where a lot of people are looking for new dishes for some things that haven't been grown historically. So for example, in Punjab, at least for the last 50, 60 years, mostly the two-crop system of rice and wheat has happened. So people haven't experimented very much with a lot of these foods. So while it may be, I always say it would be great to have a MasterChef millet challenge or something like that, or do something where a lot more people start eating them. And obviously the glycemic index, there's a difference there, and that ends up causing some differences. So I think one, on the air toxicity, there's a lot of cool things that I think you guys can work on, in just if you're an air pollution wonk. On the food side, I think this is a really interesting sort of thing. And the third maybe relates to a lot of different people in this room, is a problem like this requires heavy supply chain management and operations and logistics. And that's again something that we are trying to build with district governments in Punjab. So what the company is doing is as follows. The for-profit stuff, we are doing some manufacturing. We are taking the rice parali and making some biochar, some biofuel pellets, and some cutlery out of it. There are reasonably set and guaranteed buyers for that business. But the three other things that we are doing are, we are working with district governments across Punjab, starting this year, and hopefully over the next few years, we'll be able to work with most of them, and trying to help them manage their stubble better. But even there, as soon as you get into the straw management question, right, it's like pulling at the loose string of something that's very long, and you get into a food systems question, right? We're probably doing 3 crops because we weren't able to predict when to harvest sugarcane. I think a really interesting IoT problem, and also a technical computational problem that I've seen could be very useful across the board, is if people were able to predict when to harvest the sugarcane using some sensors and some data systems in order to tell them the right day to cut. Like 3-4 days of difference in the time of harvest of sugarcane leads to 20% of the farmer's income loss, right? Doing that better will sort of cross-subsidize the rest of the year, will allow them to take all sorts of creative decisions on their parcels of land, and maybe go back to leaving some parts fallow, being able to do regenerative soil practices. So I thought this was another problem that I saw that was very interesting, that could be worked on, and genuinely a technical university does have the capability to do that. And I think finally, if I really think of the academic ecosystem per se, I think we're also now, we're about 30 people in a small WhatsApp group. We are trying to grow this. One of the major, I think, things that even I think I like why I've joined Ganesh is that we're at the beginning of creating an ecosystem, right? You're trying to build your institution, yourself, your company as the institution goes along. So you're like let's say the first rose flower that is being planted, even as you're trying to plot an entire garden with a lot of different things. I think it requires a lot of regular interaction between not just academics, but with obviously practitioners, but even people from like outside this room who may not be able to come in here. Actually, Ganesh, you might actually invite them, but more from the principle of who gets invited into a room to say what. I think that's something that you've managed well, but most academics don't seem to do that really well. So I think more regular interactions with a lot of different disciplines, looking at the same given problem, is something that we're again doing. So if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out. We're basically taking 15 lenses to looking at rice very, very deeply. And I hope food systems will be one more of them that we'll sort of bring along. The rest is on the website. This is sort of a disparate random talk. This wasn't really a structured talk because I sort of wanted to give you a flavor of what the for-profit is doing, some of what the academic projects that you could yourself get involved in, right? So there could be a lot of great research papers that could be built on top of this, which are actually impactful, as Pravesh likes quite a bit, instead of just getting into the paper publishing machine. And I think finally, I want you to see this one slide, because this is going to be, this is my insight of how to stub the stubble in one slide that I've been taking around to everyone for a year. I'm reasonably convinced that this is the right theory of change and practice of action. So if you want to join me in any of these things, I'm also happy to chat with you. Thanks so much. Thank you, Ganesh, and thank you, everyone.